All right, guys, welcome back to 43 Outdoors. Today's video is going to be a range report and load workup, what I've got so far on the Hornady Sub X bullets. After my last video with the barns out on the range, you guys noticed that my ammo box had some 190 grain Hornady Sub X bullets in it, and we're kind of asking about it. I had thought I had done a video on it, but I really hadn't. It's some load workup I done throughout the summer. I believe I picked up the box of bullets on my Midway birthday discount back in June. And my notes say June the 10th is when I started working on it. This is something I would tinker with a little bit here and there, and then it might sit for a couple weeks or even a month, and then I get back on it. This was the bullet that I planned on deer hunting with this year, and I did, and we'll get to that a little bit later. One thing about when you choose a new bullet is I would recommend getting on the retailer's website and reading the reviews. You can read the reviews on the actual component bullet itself, or you can read it on the factory loaded option as well. On the factory ammo, it's about 1050 feet per second advertised velocity. This bullet's designed to expand at lower velocities like 900 and 1000 feet per second. And if you'll reread the reviews, when you start pushing them to higher velocities, like a higher 300 blackout velocity, they turn into more of a varmint round and they kind of grenade and come apart. So you want to keep the velocity somewhat low. I have not done much on expansion tests other than shoot several watermelons with them, and this is a watermelon thumper. It will vaporize a watermelon. All right, so after getting this bullet, I decided that I wanted to try to shoot it at around a subsonic velocity, and I started out with Shooter's World Blackout, and my first charge says 13.1 grains. I think I was going to try around 13, and that's just where it came out. We had a cartridge overall length of 2.070, and we had a light crimp. I originally wanted to try the Winchester number 41 primers in this. It's a little hotter primer. However, the striker in the firing pin and the bolt action rifle would not set them off accurately. So we had to scrap that and go with the Federal 205. The 13.1 grains got us an average velocity of 1329, extreme spread of 61, and a standard deviation of 25. And that got us a 3-inch group at 100 yards. So that was just kind of my starting charge to see where we were at. So from there, I dropped down to 11 grains, and this one particular load had no crimp, and we got our average velocity at 1050 feet per second, standard deviation of 34, extreme spread of 89. This was 100 yards. We had a 2-inch 4-shot group, and we had a flyer. I do not have the target for that. I believe that's a piece of paper I left out on my backstop, and it eventually got rained on and fell off. One thing I'll note is at 50 yards, almost every group was excellent. It didn't really matter the charge. It would shoot an inch or less at 50 yards. However, when you started stretching the subsonic loadings out to 100 yards, they really stretched the groups out. The extreme spreads were not tight, and sometimes that flyer would make a 2-inch group into a 4 or 5-inch group, and it was not reliable at all at 100 yards. And reading some of the reviews, that's what a lot of people experienced as well. So we'll go over to our next page here, and we went up to 11 grains of the Shooter's World Blackout, and we had a moderate crimp, and we had an average velocity of 1066, extreme spread of 19, and a standard deviation 19, extreme spread of 48. Had an 1 3/4 4-shot group, and it says I did have a flyer on that. So after trying a few loadings with the Shooter's World Blackout, we jumped over to the IMR 4227, which it's one of my favorite powders for 300 blackout in the lower velocities. So we started out with 9 grains, a medium crimp. We had an average velocity of 937, and let's see, that target has a 10 grain loading, so we'll come to that in a minute. Don't have any group sizes on that. I believe that's a load I shot at 50 yards. And mainly was interested in chronograph data, trying to figure out a velocity. For 9 grains, we went to 10 grains, and we had an 1.5-inch group at 100 yards, average velocity of 1077. And I thought that was a pretty good load. Here is a target at 50 yards, and it's about a 3/4-inch group. I don't have the 100-yard target, but we shot about an 1.5-inch group. Not bad, but it wasn't consistent 1.5 inches. I kept getting flyers, and for a deer hunting round, it was not consistent enough for me to use. So from there, we bumped it up to 11 grains. We had the same info above. We had a, let's see, this had no crimp. We got an average velocity of 1245, standard deviation of 31, and extreme spread of, I believe, 88. And I done that 2 different times, and the second loading got 1256 average, a standard deviation of 22, and extreme spread of 47. So it tightened up a little bit. At 50 yards, we were about a 1-inch group. So realistically, at 100, that should be a 2-inch group, but that really wasn't the case. They were opening up quite a bit more. So next we come to our 12 grain load, and that is the load that I used. We had an average velocity of 1383 feet per second. We ended up shooting a 0.684 inch group at 50 yards. So I was pretty happy with that. We loaded the same load up at 100 yards and had a average of 1377, standard deviation of 9, and the extreme spread of 24. So our extreme spreads were much tighter at this 12 grain load. I think that's just due to case fill. It is a lightly compressed load, and that is the load that I deer hunted with this year. So on this target right here, we have a couple groups at 50 yards. This is our 0.684 right here, and then we got the same charge at 100 yards, and we have the 1.233. So in all my testing, the 12 grain load would shoot pretty much the 1.25 inches or under all the time. So that's the load I chose to hunt with. I did a lot of cold bore testing with this. I would go out like on Monday, cold bore, shoot 1 round at 100 yards at a target. Put the gun up. Tuesday, come out, cold bore, shoot 100 yards. And we got pretty much the same deal. So I thought this was a reliable enough round to hunt with, and I hunted with it. I did have a very nice buck on my first morning out at about 115 yards. It was on the back side of the creek and a heavily wooded area, and he just had a steady pace as he walked, and I never could get a shot at him. If he would have stood still between 2 trees, I would have took that shot at 115 yards with that load, no issues. I ended up taking a deer, and that deer was at 40 yards. I was offhand. I was out taking a little walk, and I jumped him up. He looked at me, so I shot him. I'll put a little footage here of that deer. But the bullet performed very well. It was a heart shot, destroyed the top chamber of the heart, and the deer run about probably 40 yards and crashed. It did not bleed at all. The deer was facing me, so the bullet stayed inside him, didn't exit. Very light entrance hole in it, but it did a lot of damage inside. I did not recover the bullet. I tried my best to recover that bullet, and I never did find it. So what we can do today is maybe go out and take a few shots at 100 yards at the swingers or whatever. I don't think I'm going to set up a target this morning. It's extremely muddy, so we can set the camera up and take a few shots. But in my opinion, this is a pretty good bullet as long as you keep it about 100 yards and under. The subsonic offering, I would recommend, not stretching it out probably much past 50 yards. And for me, that's not a viable hunting bullet in my opinion, as far as the velocity being subsonic. Also in Illinois, there is a foot-pound requirement on the energy, and the factory loading of Sub X 190 grain is not enough. It does not meet the foot-pound requirements. However, bumping up the velocity, 1,400 feet per second, it's reaching the energy that it needs. And the velocity is not high enough that the bullet will grenade upon impact. It's staying together. So let me set the camera up. We'll run outside. I got a few rounds loaded up, and we can see how these do today. Okay, we are out on the range today. It's about 40 degrees, slight breeze, but shouldn't affect us too much. And like I said, I think I'm just gonna shoot the swingers today. We've got 5 swinging targets down there. Give you a view through the spot and scope. So let's get set up. All right, so I got my scope settings wrote down. I was at 1 mil elevation and 4 3/4 right. Last time I shot at 100 yards, so we'll see how close we are. We'll shoot the big one and go to the little one and see how we do. That shot favored right just a little bit. I did a center hold on it. Flip that one up. There goes the deer back behind the backstop. usually don't have a problem with those targets flipping up, but smacking them pretty good today. Okay. Can we go for the sweep? I'm having to hold just a little bit left on these. All right, 5 for 5. Okay, we are back in. I thought I'd just give you a few final thoughts. So as you saw, 100 yards, very tight shooter, plenty good to take a deer. You know, that inch to inch and a half group at 100 yards consistently is plenty good to hit the vitals of a deer. The factory loading, if you choose to hunt with that, like I said, the reviews and my testing in the subsonic range just wasn't consistent enough to take a longer shot. 50 yards, like I said, was shooting pretty tight groups. But when you stretch that out to 100, I just did not see it, and I wasn't comfortable shooting a subsonic round, you know, plus the foot-pound energy rule that we have here. So bumping the velocity up, we got our standard deviations tightened up, our extreme spreads tightened up, and it's very consistent at 100. I would not take this round much past 100 yards, and there's better options for that. So like I said, it served me good this year. I'm glad I got to take a deer with it, and it was a very ethical kill right through the heart, and you know, it stopped very quickly. I hope that answers some questions that you guys had on the Hornady Sub X. I apologize for not making a video, but it's just been kind of a hectic summer, and it was just something I tinkered with on and off, and I didn't realize that I hadn't done much with it. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you next time.